My name is Humberto Contreras. I am 66 years old. Currently, I live in Sacramento, California. However, I was born in Hermosillo, Sonora, Mexico in 1951. When I first came, I was very skeptical. I was only 9 years old, so everything was very foreign to me. I was used to my life in Mexico. I had a really good life in Hermosillo, and I loved it. And I had a lot of family there, a lot of friends. So when I came to the United States, I went to Davis, where I grew up. I knew hardly anybody except for relatives that I had never met before. I just met them, so it took me a while to get acclimated. So at first, I was kind of lonely and a little depressing, but also I couldn't really communicate with anybody because everybody spoke like they were from the moon. We emigrated from Mexico and then arrived in Davis in June 6th of 1960. So we've been here ever since. But we came basically because that was his dream, was to come back to the United States and have us raised here. I didn't face any hostile discrimination. I did work because Davis is a rural town. There was a lot of farm work and that type of labor. I did quite a bit of that growing up, and I would go to the ranches and orchards and places like that in the surrounding area. You know, Dixon, Winters, and places like that. And so a lot of the growers and people like that were actually very racist people, and they looked down at their workers, as peons and low lives and so on. So I could always see that. Even though they knew that I was Mexican and a laborer, they realized that I was different from the other migrant workers because I was more local and I was raised in an academic environment, with the city of Davis and so on. So my language was a little different. My English was different than the English spoken by the other laborers. So they saw me differently, the growers, but they were still, the racism was still there. It was just not directed at me as much, but it was still uncomfortable. I was exposed to it quite a bit, although more subtly because of my orientation. So I knew that there was no basis or no purpose for discrimination. People are just ignorant about other cultures. People are uncomfortable when they're exposed to people of other cultures and the people that look differently, or they may have different clothing and so on. And so it's kind of frustrating. I never let any discrimination or racism hold me back because I knew that I was just as good, if not better, than many other people that I was exposed to. So I just dealt with it. And like I said, some of it I let roll off my back, and most of it I just proved myself because I know that I was as intelligent as everybody else. So, well, it was an interesting part of history, and I'm glad that I went through there. I was eligible for that. We had a draft at the time, and so in order to stay out of the draft, I went to college, and I wanted to go to college anyway, so it was a no-brainer to enroll, and I went to Sacramento Community College. And I was pretty much against the Vietnam War, like many, growing up in a liberal town. That was the sentiment for the most part there. So I was against the war, as were many other people that I chose to join up with. I was active with the MECHA, the Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán. So I was active with them, and there was an anti-war faction within the organization. So I was active not just with the Chicano movement and supporting the United Farm Worker movement, but also being involved in the anti-war movement as well. And so I stayed out of Vietnam. I stayed out of the military as a result. As when I was younger, before I became more, somewhat politically aware, joining the military was one of the aspirations that I had, that I wanted to be involved in the military. But as the Vietnam War became more of a prominent part of society, I decided that that's not a direction that I wanted to go. So I stayed out of the military because of that. So my sentiments were more, anti-war. The United Farm Workers had a lot of rallies because, being in Sacramento, the capital, they were very active in this area, and the students were very supportive of those organizations. So I was active in a lot of rallies and helped organize some rallies and distribute flyers and information. I was majoring in graphic arts and design, so I was actually designing quite a bit of literature and things like that people who wanted to put together some posters and flyers and things like that. I would actually help design and produce and distribute. So we were involved in marches, like marching to the Capitol to demonstrate unity with the farm workers. Also, the anti-war movement. There was a lot of marches. There was a major march that I went to in San Francisco. It was a May Day parade march in 1972, I believe it was. And they drew like over 100,000 people from all over the area. And there were like major marches throughout the nation and the world against the war at that time. It was a major, one-day demonstration. And so I went to that. It was a really long march. We went up from Market Avenue all the way up Geary Street to the major park in San Francisco. And being the city having so many hills, you could see the crowds of people for miles in one direction, and you look back and there's masses of people for miles in the other direction. So it was quite an interesting gathering of large numbers of people who were all united in the same cause. So that was kind of a learning experience for me, seeing people from all over walks of life to join in the anti-war. It wasn't just hippies. Mm-hmm. It was a lot of students. There was a lot of middle class people, a lot of business people that were there that were actually involved in it. And so it was good to see that it wasn't just leftist types that were involved in this kind of a movement. It was like a whole society that was involved. It actually gave me the confidence that the activities that we were involved with as students, a lot of those efforts were actually working to get people united against the cause, for the anti-war cause. So they gave me a lot of inspiration. It was a really good learning process for me growing up. Were you serious?
Okay, just go ahead, tell me. What's your name and where are you from?
My name is Humberto Contreras. I live in Sacramento, California. I'm 66 years old. However, I was born in Hermosillo, Sonora, Mexico in 1951.